Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. The central government has said that GST revenues are not sufficient for compensating the state governments. See, GST stands for Goods and Services Tax, which has provided for a unified indirect taxation system in the country. Before GST was implemented, a variety of indirect taxes were being implemented separately by the center and the states. Under the earlier model of indirect taxation, the states had a lot of autonomy with regard to the imposition and collection of indirect taxes. Under this earlier model, the states could levy their own indirect taxes, they could collect them, and they could keep this revenue for themselves. But in the earlier model, the imposition and collection of multiple indirect taxes by the center and the state was said to be promoting inefficiency, and it was not only leading to lower indirect tax revenues, but it was also hampering growth in the economy. So, in order to overcome these challenges, a unified indirect tax known as GST was proposed, and it was introduced through the 101st Constitutional Amendment by making the necessary constitutional changes. The GST came into effect from 2017 onwards. But when the GST model was proposed, there was a lot of opposition from the state governments because under a unified indirect taxation model, the state governments were supposed to lose their autonomy to levy and collect indirect taxes. And it was also anticipated that there would be a loss of revenue for the state governments. So, in order to bring the state governments on board, the central government promised to compensate the states for any revenue loss that they might incur for a period of 5 years since the implementation of GST. But over the last couple of years, the center has failed to adequately compensate the state governments. This is mainly because of lower tax collection under GST. You can see in this graph that GST revenues for 2019 has shown a mixed record. At the start of the fiscal, that is in the first quarter, GST revenue started increasing. But in the middle of the fiscal year, there has been a drastic decline in GST revenue collection, especially in the months of August and September. Even though it has started to improve of late, the center has found it difficult to compensate the states for the revenue loss that they were incurring. See, the central government had set a budget estimate of around 6.6 lakh crore rupees to be collected out of GST revenue. This was the budget estimate for the 2019-20 financial year. But out of this estimate, only around 50% of it has been collected in the first 8 months. So there has been a significant shortfall in GST revenue. According to government estimates, around 1 lakh crore rupees should have been collected in the compensation pool, out of which the compensation was supposed to be paid to the state governments. But out of this estimate, only around 64,000 crore rupees have been collected so far in this fiscal year. That's the reason why the center has expressed concern and it has returned to the state governments, stating that due to shortfall in GST revenue collection, it may not be able to compensate the states for the losses that might arise out of the taxation system. This comes at a time when large states such as Rajasthan, Kerala, Delhi, Punjab and West Bengal have already expressed concern over the pending compensation dues that they are yet to receive from the center. In fact, the state government of Punjab has already threatened the central government that it would drag the matter to the Supreme Court if its dues are not released on time. So the center is looking to discuss these issues and it is seeking suggestions from the state governments at the upcoming GST Council meeting. See, under the GST system, a GST Council has been set up which acts as the apex decision-making body to decide upon the tax rates, rules, regulations, etc. The GST Council is headed by the Union Finance Minister and it also consists of finance ministers from all the states. This body also acts as a platform where the differences and the disputes between the center and the states could be discussed and resolved. So the center is expecting that at the next GST Council meeting, these issues could be discussed, and it is also seeking suggestions from the states to improve tax collection, to review the tax rates, and to improve tax compliance. Now let's take up the next article. The central government is making all the preparations to introduce the controversial Citizenship Amendment Bill in the Parliament next week. See, the Citizenship Amendment Bill proposes to grant Indian citizenship to non-Muslim refugees from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan, provided if they have faced religious persecution in these three countries. Religious minorities in these countries, such as Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Christians and Parsis, they would be granted Indian citizenship if they seek refuge in India because of the religious persecution that they might have faced in these countries. The Citizenship Amendment Bill was introduced in the earlier Lok Sabha, but the bill had lapsed due to the dissolution of the earlier Lok Sabha. But when the bill was introduced in the Parliament, it had generated a major controversy, because the critics of the bill have pointed out that the provisions of the bill are discriminatory towards Muslims. It violates the principles of equality and secularism, which are a part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. And the earlier version of the bill had also triggered massive protests in the northeast of India. Because if the bill is passed, it will end up granting Indian citizenship to Bengali Hindus and Buddhists who might have illegally migrated from Bangladesh to the northeast of India. See, the native ethnic groups of northeast are opposed to all types of illegal migrants who entered the northeast from Bangladesh. They are opposed to all types of illegal migrants irrespective of their religion. But if the Citizenship Amendment Bill is passed, it will end up granting Indian citizenship to Bengali Hindus and Buddhists even if they have migrated illegally to India. So this bill is not only discriminatory towards Muslims, but it would end up favoring Bengali Hindus and Buddhists who might have illegally migrated to India. That's the reason why the native ethnic groups in the northeast, they are opposed to the bill, and it has generated massive protests in the northeastern states. The centre has allocated a very high priority to this bill, and it has already started to take a series of preparatory steps in order to ensure that the bill is smoothly passed in the Parliament. See, today, the Union Cabinet is expected to approve the bill, and by next week, the government might try to introduce the bill in the Parliament. So the BJP has already instructed all its MPs to be present in the Parliament without fail, because the ruling party would like to capitalize on the numbers that it has in the Parliament. So it has directed all its MPs to be present without fail, and it has equated the priority of the bill with the changes that were made to Article 370 in order to highlight how important the passage of the bill is for the central government. So the BJP has already directed all its MPs to be present in the Parliament without fail. And Union Home Minister Amit Shah has already started to interact with all the stakeholders in the northeast in order to cut down the controversy in this region. In order to cut down the opposition towards the bill, the Home Minister has already started to engage with the civil society of Northeast, with the regional political parties, and as well as the Students' Union of the Northeast. Plus, the Home Minister has also stated that the provisions of the bill is not against the principle of secularism, because according to him, the bill discriminates only against Muslims of three Islamic nations. According to the Union government and according to the Union Home Minister, Muslims in these three countries are unlikely to face religious persecution because all the three are Islamic nations. The Union Home Minister has said that the bill does not discriminate against Indian Muslims. Instead, it only discriminates against Muslims from three Islamic nations where they are in majority, and where they are unlikely to face any religious persecution. The government feels that religious persecution could be faced only by the religious minorities such as Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Christians, and Parsis in these three Islamic nations. But the critics of the bill have pointed out that the provisions of the Citizenship Amendment Bill has left out various sects of Islam such as the Shias, Ahmadiyas, and Hazaras who also face religious persecution in these countries. They have criticized the government for deliberately pushing a bill which is communal in nature. Now let's take up an article from page number 4. India tests Swedish technology to reduce stubble burning. In various sessions, we have discussed how the problem of stubble burning in the states of Punjab and Haryana is primarily responsible for the deteriorating air quality in the Delhi NCR region. So the government of India is trying to work on a number of solutions to tackle the problem of stubble burning. It is trying to work with the state governments. Even the judiciary has stepped in, and the Supreme Court has imposed a ban on stubble burning in the states of Punjab, Haryana, and in and around the Delhi NCR region. But despite this ban, the practice continues, and this releases significant quantities of particulate matter which is affecting the air quality in the Delhi NCR region. So in order to enforce the ban, the government has tried to implement a system of incentives and penalties. It has tried to subsidize the hiring of modern harvesting equipment such as happy seeders. Such modern mechanized harvesting equipment cuts the paddy crop as close to the ground as possible, and this leaves behind very little stubble in the ground. It has also tried to impose hefty penalties against the farmers in order to deter them from burning the stubble. But none of these methods have worked entirely, and the practice has continued, and it causes significant air pollution in the Delhi NCR region. So as a result, the government has started to try out a few technologies and a few processes through which the paddy stubble could be converted into something useful. This article refers to one such technology. The Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister has funded a pilot project in collaboration with a Swedish company. This Sweden-based company has developed a technology to convert stubble that is left behind after the harvest of the paddy crop into biocoal. See, basically, stubble is nothing but biomass, and this biomass is being converted to biocoal by using a process known as torrefaction. In this process, pyrolysis is used to convert the biomass into biocoal. Basically, the stubble is made to undergo thermal decomposition by heating the biomass to around 250 degrees to 350 degrees Celsius. And as a result of this thermal decomposition, the fuel quality in the biomass increases, and this will turn the stubble into small pellets which are referred to as biocoal. This in turn can be used as a combustion material in various industries such as steel, cement, etc. Such technologies which provide an alternate usage to stubble might be the solution to tackle the problem of stubble burning. See, this article has been published in the context of the ongoing visit of the King and Queen of Sweden to India. And we have a related article on India-Sweden relations on page number 13 as well. This article helps us understand the key areas of collaboration between India and Sweden. During this ongoing visit, the King and Queen of Sweden have signed a number of agreements with India. And having personally experienced the problem of pollution in Delhi, the King has paid special attention to the area of environment conservation, pollution control, and climate change. The King of Sweden has said that India can capitalize on the technological edge that Swedish companies have in tackling environmental problems. For example, Swedish companies have the technology to convert stubble not just into biocoal, but they can even convert stubble, that is biomass, into a number of useful products such as tissues, textiles, furniture, etc. And Swedish companies are also considered as global leaders in the field of clean and renewable energy. So, Sweden can assist India in the field of environment conservation, pollution control, and in the reduction of greenhouse gases. Apart from this, India and Sweden have a long history of cooperation in the field of defense. For example, in the 1980s, India acquired the Bofors artillery gun from Sweden. But the corruption scandal that broke out over the Bofors deal did affect relations between India and Sweden for a while. But right now, Sweden is assisting India in the development of India's indigenous artillery gun known as Dhanush, which is being developed by the Ordnance Factory Board. Then another important area of collaboration between India and Sweden is global diplomacy. Because Sweden has always been a champion of nuclear disarmament. It has always stood for peace and stability, and it has helped resolve a number of conflicts by leading a number of UN peace missions. See, India also has stood for nuclear disarmament. It has even proposed a convention at the United Nations known as the Convention on Nuclear Disarmament, which is also referred to as the Rajiv Gandhi Action Plan. And Sweden has always supported India's cause to promote nuclear disarmament at the United Nations. And since Sweden stands for peace and stability, it has been critical of India's recent approach towards Jammu and Kashmir. Before the visit of the King and the Queen, the Swedish government had expressed concern over the continuation of restrictions in Jammu and Kashmir. Sweden has expressed concern about the detention of political leaders, about the suspension of communication and internet services. So this has emerged as an issue or a point of conflict between India and Sweden. Then another area of collaboration between the two countries would be the field of Arctic research and exploration. See, because Sweden is one of the members of the Arctic Council, because a part of Swedish territory lies in the Arctic Circle. The Arctic Circle is considered to be very significant with regard to scientific research because it will help us to understand environment conservation, climate change, etc. India has already made significant investments in scientific research in the Arctic, and it has even set up a research station known as Himadri with collaboration from Norway. So India would look for similar assistance from Sweden as well. Plus, the Arctic region is blessed with plenty of natural resources. And the exploitation of these resources is becoming a possibility due to melting ice caps in the Arctic. So the possibility of resource exploitation in the Arctic has triggered a geopolitical conflict amongst the Arctic states. And the Arctic states, which are members to the Arctic Council, they play a key role in deciding upon the rules and the regulations. They play a key role in defining the guidelines for Arctic research and Arctic resource exploitation. So India's relations with Sweden is extremely important because Sweden is one of the members of the Arctic Council. And recently, even India has acquired the observer status as a non-Arctic state. So as a result, India would like to build its relations with the members of the Arctic Council, and this of course includes Sweden as well. Now let us take up a very important editorial from page number 10, which evaluates the culture of rape and sexual violence that has become prevalent in India. Of course, everyone is aware of the last week's brutal rape and murder of a veterinarian in Hyderabad. The editorial refers to this incident and this culture of sexual violence against women in India as a national shame. This brutal incident has shaken the conscience of the country again, and it has led to massive protests across India. The issue has even been brought up in the parliament by the MPs, and they have questioned the inadequacy of our criminal system and our judicial system. These developments are a reminder of the 2012 Nirbhaya case that took place in Delhi. Following the brutal rape and murder of Nirbhaya, massive protests broke out across India, and this pushed the government of India in 2012 to set up the Justice J.S. Verma Committee in order to suggest reforms to India's criminal and judicial system. Based on the recommendations of this committee, the Criminal Law Amendment Act was passed by the Indian Parliament in 2013. This legislation introduced a number of changes to key legislations such as the Indian Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, the Indian Evidence Act, the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, the Juvenile Justice Act, etc. Some of these legislations, which are of colonial origin, were found to be outdated and inadequate to prevent sexual violence against women. So, based on the recommendations of the Justice J.S. Verma Committee, a few stringent provisions were added to these legislations. And the POCSO Act was also amended in order to strengthen the provisions which will help in preventing sexual violence against minors. Then the debate around the Juvenile Justice Act has always been highly controversial because the question is, how should we deal with a rape accused if he is a minor? The question is, should we treat him as a juvenile and provide for lenient punishment? Or, depending on the gravity of the crime, should a minor be provided with harsh and stringent punishment? Some of these questions were partially answered by the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013, and it introduced the provision of death penalty for rape, especially when the victim dies or if the victim is pushed into a vegetative state. Death penalty has also been provided for repeat offenders. Then recently in 2018, the law has been again amended to provide for death penalty for the rape of minors who are under the age of 12. The amended law has also introduced the provision of life imprisonment for the rape of minors who are under the age of 16 years. Despite the introduction of these stringent provisions and legal reforms, there has been no significant impact on the ground with regard to women's safety. The culture of rape and sexual violence against women continues to be prevalent in India. This issue has brought national shame to the country because India has been criticized around the world for its questionable track record on women's safety. The lack of women's safety in India can be further highlighted by referring to statistics that has been published by the National Crime Records Bureau. According to the latest data provided by the NCRB, around 3.59 lakh cases have been registered in the last 1 year for crimes against women. This is a 6% increase as compared to 2016. So basically, crimes against women has clearly gone up. And out of these cases, 21.7% of the cases are related to outraging the modesty of women. And 7% of these cases are related to rapes. But please remember, these are just the cases which have been reported. Because in a country like India, where we live in a patriarchal society, where the legal and the judicial system is ineffective, where the policing system is not able to protect its women, the number of cases which go unreported would be many times higher than the cases that have been reported. In the light of these challenges to women's safety, a few activists, MPs, celebrities, and our social media warriors have suggested a few solutions. They want the rape accused to be publicly lynched. They have even suggested castration as a solution. They have even called for immediate death penalty without trial for the rape accused. They have even drawn parallels with Iran, Saudi Arabia, other autocratic regimes in the Middle East, China, etc., where brutal punishments such as public hanging, stoning, etc., are handed out for such crimes. But the question is this the path a democratic civilized country like India should take? Or let's assume for a second these measures are implemented, but the question is, will it really promote women's safety? Will it really bring an end to brutal rapes and sexual violence against women? See, the public outrage against such incidents is entirely justified and very much needed in order to push the government to act. Even the call for a death penalty might be justified. Because, see, the debate over capital punishment is an entirely different debate. But there is no question that a harsh punishment must be delivered to sexual offenders. But the question is, should we follow mob justice? Or should we follow autocratic and dictatorial states? See, the answer to this question is a clear no. These radical steps will never really help to promote women's safety. It will not bring an end to rapes and sexual violence in India. So then what should we do to promote women's safety? What steps can we take to prevent such brutal rapes and cases of sexual violence? The answer to this question lies in a two-step solution. First, we need to set up a strong deterrent against rape and sexual violence. This is the responsibility of the government and the civil society at large. And second, we as a society need to fight against patriarchy, which is prevalent not just in our society, but even in our homes. With regard to legal and administrative reforms, the government needs to reform our outdated laws and provide for stringent provisions. The government needs to provide for efficient policing, not just to prevent the crime, but also to carry out effective scientific investigation. The police should also be sensitized to deal with victims of rape. And on the judicial side, fast-track courts needs to be set up. Because these measures can help in providing for swift justice and a harsh punishment which can act as a deterrent against these crimes. For example, through these legal and administrative reforms, we can set a time period within which rape cases have to be resolved. For example, a reasonable time frame of around 6 to 12 months can be fixed for resolving rape cases. This includes investigation, collection of evidence, filing of charge sheet, prosecution, and punishment. If the punishment is swift and harsh, it definitely has the potential to act as a deterrent against crime. The next important step in our fight against rape and sexual violence has to be the fight against patriarchy, which has become prevalent not just in our society but as well as in our homes. See, in a patriarchal society, women are always treated as inferior to men. Women are treated as objects and property to be owned and used by men. This is something that we practice not just in our society but as well as in our homes. If you look at the orthodox practices that we have in our society and in our homes, it becomes very clear that we expect women to dress in a certain manner, to behave in a certain manner. We expect that women are duty bound to carry out certain responsibilities, such as cooking or looking after children or looking after the in-laws. Whereas these restrictions, these guidelines, they do not apply for men in the society. So when women are being treated as objects and property to be owned by men in a patriarchal society, it encourages the culture of domination. When women are being told to dress in a certain manner, or to conduct in a certain manner, or to behave in a certain manner, it is just encouraging the men to exert their domination over women in a patriarchal society. See, the root of patriarchy starts in our homes, when differences are created between a male child and a female child, when a different set of standards are applied for the female and the male. It is this culture of domination over women which has been encouraged in a patriarchal society that serves as the root cause of rape. Because rape is not just about sexual gratification. It is more about domination of women by men. That's the reason why rape has always been used as a weapon of war. If you look at various conflicts, be it a civil war, be it a ethnic conflict, or be it riots, in all such cases, rape has been used as a weapon of war in order to exert domination. So, if we as a society are serious about protecting our women, then we need to fight against patriarchy that is prevalent not just in our society but as well as in our homes. And this begins with gender sensitization. Gender sensitization should begin at a very young age. Boys need to be taught to respect girls. Boys and men need to be taught that a no means a no. Unless we put an end to patriarchy in the Indian society, and unless we build a strong legal and administrative system which will act as a deterrent, we will not be able to protect or promote women's safety in India. Now let's take up an article from page number 13. The DRDO has offered to develop a new fighter jet for the Indian Navy. See, the DRDO is currently in the process of developing the naval variant of the light combat aircraft or Tejas. But due to the controversy surrounding the Tejas program and the long delays that the light combat aircraft has faced, the requirements of the Indian Navy are unlikely to be met by the naval variant of LCA. So that's the reason why the DRDO has offered to develop a new fighter jet for the Indian Navy. According to the DRDO, this proposed naval fighter jet will be meeting all the requirements of the Indian Navy, which aspires to be a true blue water navy. See, right now, the Indian Navy is operating an aircraft carrier known as INS Vikramaditya. This is an aircraft carrier that India has acquired from Russia. And on board INS Vikramaditya, the Indian Navy is operating the MiG-29 fighter aircrafts that India has acquired from Russia. But going forward, India is looking to develop its own aircraft carrier. This program has been named as the Indigenous Aircraft Carrier Program. Under this, the first indigenous aircraft carrier is being built, and it has been named as Indigenous Aircraft Carrier 1 or INS Vikrant. So the proposal of the DRDO is that to meet the requirements of INS Vikrant, which is currently undergoing construction, the agency will develop a new naval fighter jet. Plus, the Indian Navy is planning to acquire a third aircraft carrier as well under the indigenous program in order to establish itself as a true blue water navy. So this proposed naval fighter jet could possibly meet these requirements of the Indian Navy. And in this article, there's one more important point which can be very useful for prelims. This article refers to a naval exercise known as Milan. This is a joint multilateral maritime naval exercise that is organized by the Indian Navy. This is the largest maritime exercise that is organized by the Indian Navy because around 15 to 16 countries take part in this maritime naval exercise. The Indian Navy has been hosting the Milan exercise since 1995, and usually it was being held once in every 2 years. But of late, it has been made into an annual event, and India invites around 15 to 16 like-minded friendly countries in the Indian Ocean region. Now let us take up the practice questions. Which of the following statements are correct? The PSLV was developed to allow India to launch its Indian remote sensing satellites into the sun synchronous orbits. Variants of PSLV can also launch small size satellites into the geostationary transfer orbit. Notable payloads launched by PSLV includes Chandrayaan-1, Chandrayaan-2 and the Mars orbiter mission. The first and the second statements are correct and the third statement is incorrect. See, PSLV was primarily developed to launch the IRS satellites into the sun synchronous orbit. And small payloads can be launched into the GTO as well by using strap-on motors and boosters that are available with different variants of the PSLV. But the third statement is incorrect because PSLV was not used to launch Chandrayaan 2. Yes, it was used to launch Chandrayaan 1 and the Mangalyaan mission. But Chandrayaan 2 was launched by GSLV Mach 3. So as a result, the third statement is incorrect. Option B is the right answer. Now let us take up the second practice question. Who amongst the following played a key role in establishing the military and political supremacy of the East India Company over Bengal? Amongst the given options, option A is the correct answer, because it was Robert Clive who played a key role in the Battle of Plassey, which helped the East India Company to establish its military and political supremacy over the Bengal province. Now let us take up the third practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? The Telecom Regulatory Authority of India is a statutory body set up by an Act of Parliament to regulate telecom services and tariffs in India. This is a correct statement. It is a statutory body because it has been set up through the TRAI Act of 1997. And it functions as a regulatory body for telecom services and telecom tariffs. The second statement says, TRAI consists of a chairperson and not more than 2 full-time members and not more than 2 part-time members. This statement about the composition of TRAI is also correct. The third statement says, it also acts as an appellate tribunal and settles disputes. This statement is incorrect. See, initially when TRAI was set up in 1997, it was carrying out 2 responsibilities. One, it was regulating the telecom sector, and second, it was also settling disputes by acting as an appellate tribunal. But later in 2000, the TRAI Act was amended. The TRAI Act was amended and another institution was set up known as the Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal. So since 2000, dispute settlement and acting as an appellate tribunal has been the responsibility of TDSAT, whereas TRAI is solely responsible for regulating the telecom sector. So the third statement is incorrect. Option C is the right answer. Now let us take up a map-based question. Which of the following statements are correct? Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and United States are members to the Arctic Council. India and China are some of the non-Arctic observer states to the Arctic Council. Both the statements are correct. Option C is the right answer. Please look at the map. This map shows the members of the Arctic Council. See, there are 8 countries which have full-time membership to the Arctic Council. This includes the countries which have sovereign territory inside the Arctic Circle. So this covers Canada, United States, Russia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. Now let us take up a practice question from the 2016 prelims paper. The Montagu-Chelmsford proposals were related to constitutional reforms. Option D is the correct answer, because the Montagu-Chelmsford proposals formed the basis of the Government of India Act 1919, which is also referred to as the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. This functioned as the Constitution of India, and hence these proposals are related to constitutional reforms. Finally, let's take up a mains practice question. With increasing cases of sexual offences against women, what measures do you suggest to improve women's safety? Kindly write an answer to this question and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.